What is music? A usual response would be a pleasant melody, but to the tortured philosopher like myself, one has to dig deeper and ask, when is a collection of notes a melody? And what is it about music that actually defines it as music, as opposed to any other type of sound? This is the nature of philosophical inquiry, digging away at a deeper level to discover what may lie at the actual core of the concept of whatever topic is being subjected to the rigours of philosophical investigation. The way this refining nature of philosophical inquiry has been done since the days of Plato and Socrates is that of argument and counter-argument, until hopefully a kernel of truth may finally emerge. Using these methods then, I shall ask once again, what is music? Music certainly consists of sound, but not every sound can be classed as music. So should we say that only pleasant sounds are musical? Not necessarily. The sound of a flowing brook is very pleasant and soothing to the ear, yet this does not constitute music, so there must be another few essential ingredients missing in my attempt to define the concept. A combination of pleasant sounds with structure, perhaps. However, there are examples of structured, pleasant sounds which are still not strictly music. Birdsong is a classic example. Although there can be an underlying structure and the sound is certainly pleasant, I would still hesitate to call a regular garden sparrow a composer. Harmony is another really important ingredient into the mix. It is the sound of harmonious intervals which, presumably due to the human mind's predisposition to value order in contrast to disorder in its perception of the world, brings a sense of appreciation for the symmetry of sound, and this in turn can bring harmony to the very soul of the listener. However, harmony in isolation still is not music, as I learnt the hard way after the living torture of trying to teach absolute beginners piano, mostly to the terminally tone deaf, for 10 miserable years between 1992 to 2002. Now, as I soon discovered, if I listened continuously to a young child bashing out a 3-note triad played repeatedly on the piano at treble fortissimo levels, this very soon brought deluges of disharmony to my soul. Also, some of the very best folk melodies sound best when sung without any harmonic accompaniment, yet they are still very much music. So, harmony by itself then is not at the core of what makes music into music. We must dig deeper. A combination of pleasant sounds with structure, harmony and rhythm, perhaps. However, imagine I am on board a steam train listening to birdsong while passing leisurely through the countryside. We have a bit of harmony here. There's 3 things I'm listening to: the sound of the steam train, the birdsong and the sounds of the countryside. Also, I have both the regular rhythm of the steam engine and the background of birdsong in the countryside to provide structure, yet this is still not music. Like harmony though, rhythm is still a core ingredient of the musical cake mixture. Maybe it is how rhythm mirrors the rhythm of our heartbeats, so that a faster beat literally makes us feel like our heart is beating faster, or a regular beat reminds us of the natural rhythm of our footsteps during walking, running or marching, depending on the speed of the beat. Or even on a more erotic level, how rhythms of ever increasing speed mirror those of the sexual act. And from these natural physiological responses to the sound and feel of rhythms, maybe this is how dance started off, a direct consequence of the literal feelings of movement, vitality and even eroticism, which can be directly communicated by the rhythmic component of music. However, I think the essential component still missing from all the other ingredients of a musical cake mixture, which I have so far been attempting to analyse, is that in the music there is also the expression of emotion through the pleasant sounds and melodic structure of music, which is further emphasised by the use of rhythm and harmony. Throughout all these different ingredients of music, it is the expression of emotion from the performer to the listener which seems to be the first real definition of what is at the very core of music. In my opinion, the expression of emotion, if you like, is the egg component of the musical cake mix, which literally binds all the other ingredients together to transform them from sound into music. Indeed, when only one or two of the other ingredients of the musical cake are played with the communication of emotion, very often we would still consider the result as music. For example, the intricacies of a jazz percussion solo or the entrancing polyrhythms of a traditional African musical combination are played with such spirit and vitality that it would be impossible not to call them music, despite the fact there is no melodic line or harmony. However, crying or sighing and laughter are all sounds which still express emotion through sound, yet these are not music. The essential difference between the sounds associated with raw human emotion and the expression of emotion through music, then, would seem to be that the emotion communicated through music is, how could we put it, the communication of aesthetic emotion. But that begs the question, what exactly is aesthetic emotion? To answer this question is to really get to the root of the concept of what makes music into music. This whole notion of the aesthetics of music has puzzled me since the age of 16. Whilst walking through the countryside, I was listening to an old cassette tape of Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony No. 6 on my battered old Sony Walkman when it suddenly occurred to me, why bother listening to music which is about the feelings of being in the countryside when I'm actually in the countryside already? Just what was it about the feelings communicated through Beethoven's magnificent music about being in the countryside which was so enticing and so much more immediate than my direct, raw experience of actually being in the countryside? Way over 30 years after first becoming so perplexed by this issue, and a degree in philosophy later, I now finally feel able to answer this intriguing question. I have come, eventually, to the conclusion that the essential difference between the feelings of my raw, direct experience of actually being in the countryside and the feelings invoked by the aesthetic experience of hearing Beethoven's beautiful music about being in the countryside is like the difference between the taste of raw grape juice and that of a refined bouquet of flavours to be discovered and appreciated in a fine, mature wine. Music has the uncanny ability to elevate our raw emotions by a process of communicating directly to our higher level cognitive faculties. A sort of refined, distilled essence of the particular emotion being communicated aesthetically. Now this is what I would call aesthetic emotion. The nature of this distilled aesthetic emotion is almost detached from the raw emotion we feel in everyday life, and the detached nature of aesthetic emotion in all the arts can probably be best understood for example, in my gory appreciation of the suspense and roller coaster ride of horror so brilliantly conveyed in the Saw movie series. However, I would certainly feel utter revulsion if I were to witness all the gory scenes in these movies for real. To sum up, in the context of philosophy philosophically analysing music again, we are able to intellectually appreciate the more detached, distilled, aesthetic emotion communicated so directly through music, whereas the raw emotion we feel from actual physical experience does not engage our higher cognitive faculties in such a similar fashion. So, it is this intellectual elevation of emotion which creates aesthetic appreciation of the emotions being communicated through music, which to me is the answer to my decades-old riddle of why hearing Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony about the feelings of being in the countryside is like savouring a fine wine, whilst in comparison, my raw experience of actually being in the countryside myself was like drinking raw grape juice. So, why does music communicate emotion so directly? To answer this question, I think it has something to do with the fact that during the hundreds and thousands of years of human evolution, even before we communicated through the means of language, we still communicated all our emotions and needs through sounds. For example, any person from any culture of any age knows instinctively that the sound of crying is associated with feelings of sadness. The sound of laughter and exclamations of elation are associated with feelings of joy, whereas screams and grunts are associated generally with anger. The origins of music, therefore, would seem to predate our use of language. I think this is why music has such a direct effect on the listener. In other words, humans are literally hardwired by their own evolution to associate specific combinations of sounds with specific emotional feelings. This would possibly explain why, say, a minor third instantly sounds sad to the human listener, as it mirrors the sound of a sigh, whereas notes, say, a major third apart is associated with happiness, as it mirrors a primitive exclamation of elation. Maybe. It is a mystery. So, how did music begin? As noted by Kurt Sachs in his book The Rise of Music in the Ancient World, East and West, music almost certainly started with singing. Sachs was one of the first musicologists of the earlier part of the 20th century to actually record the sounds of music from every corner of the world and from virtually every culture, as well as recording the spontaneous singing of very young infants who significantly had no influence from anyone else in creating their simple spontaneous melodies of usually 2 or more notes. As Sachs discovered, there is quite literally no human culture on the planet, no matter how remote, that does not have at least some tradition of rudimentary musical practice. Indeed, human vocal cords, like any musical string, are and have always been subject to the laws of the harmonic series, and depending on the tension applied to them by the particular individual who happens to own them, they will, like any, say for example, a natural trumpet, usually generate combinations of intervals of the harmonic series, which form notes of the regular major chord. Therefore, the foundation for musical expression is quite literally built into us as human beings. It would not have needed much of a further imaginative spark from our very early ancestors to realise that certain combinations of these notes create certain emotional effects, presumably due to how they mirrored the sounds of our basic pre-linguistic emotional communication. It was this aesthetic insight which led to the development of ancient Greek modes, their exotic chromatic variations used in the ancient Near East, and eventually, unfortunately, to the dull, monotonously standardised palette of either major or minor scales used in dull Western music today. What can we conclude? From this brief conceptual analysis, music can be best described as the direct communication of aesthetic emotion from the musician to the listener, with aesthetic emotion being defined as a more detached, refined, and, if you like, concentrated form of raw emotion, which has the aesthetic property of being able to elevate the original raw emotion by the direct stimulation of our intellect. Only through music, due to our evolutionary predisposition to associate specific sounds with specific emotions, can these emotions be so directly communicated to our higher cognitive faculties, where the finer points of these aesthetic emotions can be artistically appreciated by the listener. Music can then literally heal the soul, because due to our truly archaic pre-linguistic ability to express emotion through specific sounds, it follows that music is the only artistic medium which communicates the beauty of aesthetic emotion directly and immediately to our higher cognitive faculties, which is certainly what seems to account for the transporting quality we often associate with the very best music. In this way, like a magic carpet, music can transport us from our own inner sufferings and take us on a fantastic journey of inspiration and imagination, while simultaneously instilling in us an appreciation of the timeless geometrical symmetry of harmonious musical intervals. And in doing so, music can in time, just as in the biblical account of how David's lyre soothed the troubles of Saul, restore the inner harmony of our very souls once more.